The date is April 14, 1912, from Southampton, England to New York in New York City, USA. Passenger liner RMS Titanic.
Titanic, largest ship the world had ever known. The last word in luxury. The ship, palatial, the food, delicious. The rudder alone weighed 100 tons.
The Titanic is a ship of dreams, the epitome of modern technology, of luxury and opulence. It looks like a cross between the Ritz and an English grand country house.
Titanic was the showpiece of the shipping line. Built by Harland and Wolff, the famous shipyard in Belfast. She is absolutely huge, 10 decks, 840 cabins. An absolute masterpiece of human engineering.
I had never been on an ocean voyage. I was afraid of the sea. But Harvey, my husband, and our 8-year-old daughter Marjorie and I decided to go to America that way.
There was no moon. A brilliant, starry night. I'd never seen the sea smoother. It had become much colder.
At 23, I was the youngest stewardess on the ship. I was enjoying the trip tremendously. The first 3 days were very calm. We were another 3 days before we would reach New York.
I hadn't meant to sail on the Titanic. Urgent business in New York forced me to take the first available boat.
It's a Sunday. First class passengers had probably spent the day enjoying themselves. They had eaten roast duckling and sirloin of beef and foie gras and truffles and lamb with mint sauce and stuffed zucchini and chocolate eclairs. Maybe they've gone to the sauna in the Turkish baths, or they've played a round of squash or gone to the gym. They've had a joyful, relaxing day. They're full of anticipation that they're going to be arriving in New York in 2 or 3 days' time. It's been the perfect day.
My name is Selini Yazbek. My husband and I were on our way to America to make our home.
It's a misconception that Titanic was first and foremost a luxury ship. Titanic was primarily an emigrant ship, and it was to ferry people, working people, from Europe to America. About 3/4 of the Titanic's passengers are in second or third class. And this might be the first time they've been away from home. And maybe it's the first taste of freedom from very oppressive environments. By collating all of these memories from different parts of the ship, memories that could easily have been lost to history, that's the way in. That's how we understand the story of the Titanic.
I joined her in Belfast while she was still in the builder's hands. The biggest and finest ship in the world. On that night of April 14th, the first officer took over from me. We both remarked on the ship's steadiness, how comfortably she was slipping along. We knew perfectly well we were entering the region where ice might be sighted, and had taken precautions. As none of these bergs lay on our course, well, they didn't directly concern us.
Doesn't matter whether it's a ship all the way down to a section of Marines in my circumstance. There is a system and command structure. Everyone had a job to do, and this is the point where the ship just begins to tick over. The navigation crew that are at the top of the ship are settling into their evening routine. The engineers that are down in the boiler room are working on a 4-hour shift to just keep the ship moving. The captain is retired to his cabin, comfortable that his crew that ultimately have been at work since the ship left Belfast are very much in control.
I joined the Marconi staff last July and was transferred to the Titanic at Belfast. I didn't have much to do aboard except to relieve Phillips, the senior operator.
Titanic, this is Californian. We are calling ahead to report on ice.
It's a tense situation in the wireless room because the equipment broke down the day before. And so he's got this great backlog of work to do. And he's focused on it, he's concentrating on it. The last thing he wants is new information.
Keep out. We're busy.
This unique opportunity to understand the sinking of the Titanic from the perspective of those who are actually there. We're starting to piece things together, but we're working with people's memories. And there might be a bit of a bias where people will try and make sense of what was going on.
Frederick Fleet, sailor, lookout man, Southampton, England. 25 next October. We are there to report anything we see. Watch was nearly over. I had done the best part of 2 hours. It was not very large when I first saw it. A black mass. It kept getting larger as we were getting nearer it.
I was fourth officer. I was just coming along the deck and almost abreast of the captain's quarters when I heard the report of 3 bells. That signifies something's been seen ahead.
I struck 3 bells first, then I went straight to the telephone.
What do you see? Iceberg. Right ahead. Hard as starboard, please.
And rang them up on the bridge.
Iceberg! Get ahead! Then I heard the first officer give the order.
Hard stop! The wheel was put to starboard. She started to go to port whilst I was on the telephone. My mate saw it and he told me he could see the bow coming round.
What do you do if you're trained at sea? You try to avoid the obstacle. It's a split-second decision. And this is just a cliche, isn't there, in the way we talk about trying to turn the Titanic. You can't...
And a red light goes up when the ship is supposed to stop. This red light came up. And I'm the man in charge of the watch, so I shouted, "Shut all dampers," to shut the wind off the fires. The crash came before we had them all shut.
I didn't even feel the shock. I hardly knew it had happened. There was no jolt whatsoever.
Looks like we just hit an iceberg. Hard to port, please. Yes, sir. Hard to port. We struck an iceberg.
I was about to step into bed when I seemed to sway slightly. If I'd had a brimful glass of water in my hand, not a drop would have spilled.
As Titanic shivered.
I was fast asleep. It almost threw me off the bed. Suddenly, I heard a tremendous noise. Immediately, I knew the ship had been hit hard.
You know, up on the top deck, people are thinking to themselves, "Whoa, that was close, but we got away with it." You know, it's just a near miss that somebody writes down in a log. But they don't know that this iceberg had a very large section jutting out of it underneath the water.
Water came pouring in about 2 feet from where I was standing. The ship's side was torn from the third stockhold to the forward end. The doors dropped instantly, automatically. We got through into the next section. Then the watertight compartment closed up.
As the iceberg strikes, the rivets give way. And the water starts pouring into boiler room number 6. That's on the starboard side of the ship. But Titanic is designed to have watertight compartments in the event of an emergency. There's 16 compartments, and the doors do what they're supposed to do: come down, seal off the compartments, and protect the rest of the ship. Fred Barrett and his boys escape this wall of water. At the moment, they are safe. But the thing about the Titanic is nobody had thought to put in a direct communication system between the boiler rooms, which could flood, and the bridge.
But equally, it's not just a case of sending somebody up quickly.
Mr. Murdoch, the first officer, said, "We have struck an iceberg."
Put a hard start.
I put her hard to starboard, but it was too close. She hit it.
But she hit before I could do anything.
You
Yep, what do we hit, sir? We hit an iceberg. I tried to turn away, but it was too late. She just hit it.
also said, I intended to port around it, but she hit before I could do any more. We walked out onto the bridge to take a look at the iceberg. It seemed to be a small black mass, not rising very high out of the water. The ship was past it then. It couldn't have extended above the ship's rail.
Captain Smith, the captain of the Titanic, was a very experienced seaman, a very highly respected seaman. He'd served in the Royal Naval Reserve as well as in the Merchant Navy. He was coming to the end of his career, and he must have been very, very proud that he was taking Titanic, this world-beating ship, across the Atlantic, and that would be a wonderful end to what was a glittering career. And
The engines stopped. The sudden quiet was disturbing.
When there's that sudden cut of the engines, it's going to be really noticeable. Something's going on, something's not right, something's not as it should be.
I lay still. I waited for Anne, my cabin mate, to speak, for I knew she was awake.
I moved around the deck, trying to discover what had happened. There were quite a few people standing around, questioning each other in a dazed kind of way.
We're just checking.
There were many prominent people on the passenger list, and because it was her maiden voyage, those responsible for building the ship.
Tommy Andrews.
Designer for Harland and Wolff.
He was respected by everyone. A great shipbuilder and a real gentleman. A perfectionist.
Thomas Andrews was a highly respected, in fact, probably the most respected ship designer in the UK at this time. Titanic was the pinnacle of Andrews' career. You know, he'd been building up to this moment, this amazing liner that was going to win all these different prizes, that was the queen of the seas, really. He knew a great deal about ship design. He understood buoyancy, stability, all of these issues. She's got 16 watertight compartments. That's far more than most of the liners that were steaming around. And of those 16, 4 of them could be flooded, and the ship was still stable and would stay afloat. And that's why Titanic had been billed as an unsinkable ship.
Damage is to climb out of Boiler Room 5 to this overhead gangway that's above Boiler Room 6.
We went up an escape and down to the boiler room. But we couldn't get in. There was 8 feet of water in it.
Captain Smith looked at the inclinometer, which is a sort of spirit level type gauge which shows whether the ship is stable or not, and realized there was a 5-degree list in the ship to starboard.
We're checking on the water.
Captain Smith knows that probably is water. The problem is, where is this water coming from and what the hell is going on? Titanic, of course, was a massive ship with a huge number of compartments. Therefore, finding out what's happened is a difficult and complex task, because the ability to communicate between parts of the ship was very, very poor indeed. Therefore, you have to send a person, a runner, to go down and look, and then come all the way back to the bridge to tell you what on earth is going on.
I went right down below. Into the lowest steerage as far as I could go without going into the cargo portion of the ship. And I inspected all the decks as I came up, in the vicinity where I thought she'd struck. I couldn't hear any noise. I couldn't see any damage.
Remember, the mindset is this ship is unsinkable. If you believe a ship is unsinkable, you're not looking for trouble.
I'm 21 years old. I wanted to come to America to make some money. There were 3 other boys from the same place sleeping in the same room with me. I jumped on the floor. First thing I knew, my feet were getting wet. I told the other fellas to get up, that there was something wrong.
Back to bed.
They only laughed. One of them says, "Get back to bed, you're not in Ireland now." I turned on the light. And to my surprise, there was a stream of water running along the floor.
The fact that water was seen on the deck at the level where Daniel Buckney had a cabin was seen to indicate that a second watertight compartment had actually gone as well as the boiler room, and that water was rising up the bulkhead in that compartment, and that, of course, is extremely worrying. But who exactly knew that is a different issue.
I met the carpenter coming up, absolutely out of breath, and he said, "She is evidently making water fast. Number 1 tarpaulin is ballooning. Go tell the captain."
At last, Boxall gets himself some concrete information. The carpenter he meets is talking about one of the tarpaulins up on G-deck that's covering a cargo hold. The air in there is being pushed out at speed, at pressure, by the volume of water coming in. Then, on his way to investigate, Boxall gets some more news.
I met the mail clerk coming up, and he said, "Mr. Boxall, the mail room is filling." I got back to the boat deck and I saw the captain.
The mail room is filling, sir.
And I said, "The mail room is filling, sir."
What did he say?
He walked away and left me. He went off the bridge as far as I remember.
He didn't say anything to you?
No.
I woke up of my own accord. I promised to relieve Phillips earlier than usual. I asked him how he was getting on. Suddenly, the captain put his head in the cabin.
Struck an iceberg.
"We've struck an iceberg," the captain said, "and I'm having an inspection made to tell what he's done. You better get ready to send a call for assistance.
But don't send it until I tell you.
But don't send it until I tell you." The captain went away. Phillips resumed the phones.
During his inspection, Andrews must have learned that a fourth compartment had flooded. But problems in the boiler room he was still completely unaware of. When Andrews went down into the boiler room, he was horrified, horror-struck. Water was rising, and it was rising in spaces that they had not realized it would be in. Earlier on, Andrews had said about Titanic that she was nearly as perfect as human brains could achieve. He'd put all of his knowledge into Titanic to make her as safe as she could be. But unfortunately, the ship was doomed.
You're now at a point where it is mathematically certain that this ship is going to sink. Now that the front 5 compartments are flooded, the water will start pouring over the top of the bulkheads. Picture an ice tray. You start filling it at one end, and eventually it will, rise up over the line, and the next compartment, and the next compartment, and it just continues to fill and fill. And that is ultimately what is going to draw this ship to the bottom of the ocean.
My husband and I jumped up and ran out to see what had happened. I can imagine them in my mind, middle of the night.
On his face.
Sir, we are listing, sir. Yeah, I see. I can feel it. The ship is feel like it's listing. It's taking on water.
Thomas Andrews was seen by another passenger running up to the bridge with a look of terror on his face. No doubt he realized the first time, my God, we can't save the ship. His unsinkable ship was going to sink.
I saw the captain. It was then I realized it was serious. The captain looked over. He said, "We are sinking."
All right, what shall we do? We're taking too much water. We are sinking fast. All right, we need to get everybody off the ship as quickly as possible. Don't ask questions. Just do as you're told. Get everyone off the ship as quickly as possible, please. Yes, sir.
Mr. Harvey ordered me to fetch some men down. I got between 15 and 20. The engineers put the pumps on. Those who would have gone off duty stayed on.
Right now on the Titanic, there's a red alert emergency. Down below in the boiler room, all the crew, the firemen that would normally be down there, have been called back on shift to try to pump out the water that is...
Unfortunate in Titanic is that the captain had not established a mechanism whereby he was getting information about what the actual damage was in various parts of the ship.
Once you begin to understand that you are really up against it in terms of time, it goes from, we can't save the ship, but can we get the passengers from the Titanic to a rescue ship before the Titanic sinks? The captain knows that the decisions that are made in the coming minutes, hours, ultimately that will be the decider on how many people will make it off of the ship alive.
Send a call for assistance, ordered the captain. Which call should I send? The Regulation International Call for Help. Just that. And the captain was gone.
So in the radio room, right now...
CQD, CQD, CQD. This is Titanic. We need help here. Position 41, 44, north, 50, 24, west. Alright guys, let's get these boats ready. You there, get down here. Help me with these lines. Uncover the boat, uncover this boat. You there, get down here. Help me with these lines. Uncover the boat, uncover this boat now.
Passengers, they would be perfectly safe in that smooth sea until another ship picked them up.
All right, gentlemen, you know what to do.
The crew of the Titanic had been put through a fine sieve and care taken that there were no misfits. A tap on the shoulder, an indication with the hand was quite sufficient to set the men about the different jobs.
We're not going to see hysteria. We're not even going to see anxiety at this point, not least because the information is distorted and fragmented. Nobody is thinking that the ship is going to sink. Only Captain Smith really knows the extent of what is happening.
The water, having reached F-deck, showed me she'd been badly holed. Although I knew it was serious, I'd not have thought that it was likely to prove fatal.
The captain doesn't share the information he has with all the officers that the ship is going down, and precisely why he hasn't shared it remains a mystery.
The reality is, for the crew in the Titanic at this moment, they have no idea what level of catastrophe they're in. They just know they have a job to do.
To assist and direct people.
Violet Jessup is a first-class stewardess. She's 24 years old. She's the youngest stewardess on board. The first-class stewards and stewardesses really are the ones who are responsible for making this evacuation process happen. They have to demonstrate.
All right, everybody. Wake up. Get dressed. Get your light bulbs on at once. Everyone up. Get dressed. Get your light bulbs on at once. Everybody up. Get dressed. Get your light bulbs on at once.
Bedroom on land. It didn't seem possible there could be any danger.
To those few who showed concern, a reassuring answer was, there are plenty of boats in the vicinity. They'll be with us any moment now.
I heard the crow's nest report a light on the bow. I went on the bridge right away and found this light. It was two masthead lights of a steamer just below the horizon. You could not only see her lights with the naked eye, you could see the lights of her portholes.
So Boxall can see the nearest ship to the Titanic, which is the Californian. She's very close by, about 14 miles. The Californian had already communicated with the Titanic earlier that evening that she was going to spend the night in the ice floe because it was too dangerous to continue. But the Californian would be able to reach Titanic before she sinks.
Captain Smith, we spotted a steamer on the horizon.
I told the captain about this ship. He said, "Tell them to come at once. We are sinking."
We believe the most rewarding
After the signal had been sent out, the ether seemed to be dead. No reply came through.
Californian isn't picking up any signals. The radio operator has gone to bed, not because he's negligent, but because he's allowed to go to bed. There's no duty to stay in the radio room all night, and many ships did not ask this of their operators. But then, suddenly, a chance message comes in from a wireless operator on another ship, the Carpathia.
Carpathia calling Titanic. Do you guys hear the other ships calling you? Come at once. We struck a berg. It's a CQD. Position 41, 44, 46 north, 15, 14 west. Shall I tell my captain? Are you sinking? Yes, we are. Come quick now.
I was about to retire. I'd taken my coat off. I should have been turning in about 10 minutes. Called the Titanic. And his only answer was, struck a berg. Come at once.
We told her our position and said we were sinking by the head.
I asked him if he intended me to go get the ship turned round immediately. And he said yes. Quick.
The operator went to tell his captain.
The Carpathia is a transatlantic steamship. She's fast, but she's going in the other direction. Jack Phillips hears that the radio operator is going to tell the captain that Titanic is in trouble. So here is a chance of rescue. As long as Carpathia is able to get there in time.
The stewards to be going away in a boat, it didn't seem possible that all this could actually be happening. It was the strangest scene. People bundled up in odd clothes, boarding lifeboats in the night.
People don't want to get in. Why would you want to get out of your warm bed and go in a lifeboat into the freezing water when there's no problem? You wouldn't. This is like a really annoying fire drill at school, and everybody says, no, I'll just stay here until it's finished.
At that point in time, the general public weren't really trusted. Keeping people in ignorance was considered better, and we know today that actually
All right, guys, ladies and gentlemen, this is your crew member speaking. For the time being, I will require women and children only. Gentlemen, please hold back. Thank you.
Won't go, that they will stay on board the ship. So he's actually potentially endangering the lives of the precise people he's been told to prioritize to save.
Great emergency like that, where there were limited facilities, could you not have put more people into boats?
I did not know it was urgent then. I had no idea it was urgent.
You did not know it was urgent?
Nothing like it.
Lightoller wants to do a good job, clearly. Maybe if he'd known the ship was sinking, he would have allowed men in to fill up the spaces in the lifeboats. But because the captain is withholding information, people like Lightoller can't do their job properly, and this will have disastrous consequences.
I think that Captain Smith was overwhelmed by the enormity of what was happening and was not really grasping it and taking charge.
The operator returned and told us the Carpathia was putting about and heading for us. Our captain had left us at this time. Phillips told me to run and tell him what the Carpathia had answered. I came back and heard Phillips giving the Carpathia full of directions. He told me to put my clothes on. Until that moment, I forgot I wasn't dressed. I went to my cabin and dressed and brought an overcoat to Phillips. It was very cold. I stuck the overcoat on him while he worked.
Imagine the relief in the radio room. Carpathia has answered the distress call, is coming their way. But although she's going as fast as she can, she's having to go through the same ice field where Titanic has floundered. She's 4 hours away, and Titanic isn't going to stay afloat that long. The nearest ship to Titanic is the Californian, but the radio operator's still asleep. Nobody is aware of any problem on the Titanic.
The crew of the Titanic have to think on their feet. So they start to use Morse lamps and send a signal using light rather than sound.
The ship was close enough, I thought, to read our electric Morse signal, so I signaled her. I told her to come at once. We were sinking.
In a crisis, you just have to increase your chances of survival. Survival is all about probability. You know, throwing as much muck at the wall as possible and seeing what sticks.
Then we started sending off these distress rockets, the quartermaster and I on the bridge. They go right up into the air and throw stars.
Right now, the water is rising up through the body of the ship.
The waterproof bulkheads only went up to a certain level. And by this stage, water was tipping over bulkheads and cascading into the next compartment. So compartment after compartment was being filled by water.
third-class passengers in the bowels of the ship are at most risk. They were really left in the dark. They are wading through water. They're not aware of what's going on, the rescue mission going on in the upper decks. They had to work it out themselves. My husband had left some money in our cabin, and there were all our clothes and things that we were taking to America. Salini is from Hardin, which was in Lebanon.
It might be that Lightoller has this kind of rigid view of the world. He's come in with a set of rules. It might be that under this stressful situation,
Starboard side, Officer Murdoch's approach is more pragmatic, it's more flexible.
Was better. For although there were crowds, there was no confusion. The lifeboats were being quietly filled.
If you emerge on the starboard side, then Officer Murdoch might well allow the men to join the women and their children if there are spaces left.
Murdoch, I think, probably had a sense of wanting to preserve life. And Lightoller had a stricter, more patriarchal view, perhaps, of men should sacrifice themselves for women and children. But the fact that it was happening on the same ship at the same time shows just how vague this policy was.
So it matters very much which side of the ship you're on if you're a man.
I was walking up and down the bridge, saw white lights in the sky in the direction of this other steamer. I thought perhaps the ship was in communication with some other ship, or possibly signaling to us to tell us she had big icebergs around her. It didn't occur to me the ship was in distress. I just thought there were white rockets, that's all. It might have been anything. We called her up repeatedly on the Morse lamp and received no answer whatsoever.
Some people say she replied to our rockets and our signals, but I didn't see any of them.
We'll never know why there was miscommunication between the Californian and Titanic. There seems to have been some confusion about the colour of these rockets. Were they distress signals? It's also possible that Boxall didn't see Californian's Morse lamp reply because there's something strange about the atmospheric conditions that night. You've got this weird effect of warm air underneath and colder air on top, which is
Left on the lifeboats, and more than 2,000 people on board the ship. If people don't get onto a lifeboat, they will go down with the Titanic. Lucy Duff Gordon knows that she needs to get off the ship. This is the moment to take one of those spaces.
My husband asked the officer if we might get into it.
Stewardesses in first class to help those passengers leave the ship. In third class, there's only one.
A crash woke me up. Nearly jolted me from my bed.
Eugene Daly is a 29-year-old textile worker from County Westmeath in Ireland. After years of saving, he's immigrating to America along with his cousin Maggie, her friend Bertha, and his beloved Irish pipes.
The stewards came through and told the passengers that they shouldn't be frightened. There was no danger, they said.
The third-class passengers don't know what's going on because they're not being told. And there's nothing worse than having an idea that something's really wrong, but not knowing exactly what it is. Above deck, the first and second class passengers and the crew, they can all see there aren't enough boats left, and there are hundreds of them on deck.
I stood at the bulkhead with the other stewardesses. A ship's officer ordered us into the boat.
Some lifeboats are only at half capacity.
Looking along the length of the ship, I noticed the forward part of her was lower now. Much lower.
In the military, this is what we talk about triaging. This is a case of thinking, how many people can we save at this point? There's only room for 800 people in the lifeboats that remain, so that's best case scenario. But in crisis situations, you're not getting the best case scenario. Within the panic, the confusion.
The boat was full now. As the boat was being lowered, the ship's officer called, "Here, Miss Jessup, look after this baby."
At this stage, Violet is handed a baby that has been sort of separated from their family or whoever was caring for them at that point. It's hard to fathom that.
Come with me. The ship is sinking.
There's hundreds of third-class passengers trying to navigate the warren of corridors, hallways, staircases, and they're trying to get to a part of the ship, the boat deck, that they've never been allowed onto before. Eugene, Maggie, and Bertha must navigate up several decks to the boat deck. It's now a very challenging situation, and the feeling of a loss of control on the part of the crew is getting stronger and stronger.
It was about this time that the chief officer came over from the starboard side and asked, did I know where the firearms were? I told the chief officer, yes. Come along and I'll get them for you. Come along and I'll get them for you.
Drawing weapons is very unusual. The officers clearly were aware of how panic was setting in and order and discipline amongst people were falling apart.
Into the first officer's cabin we went. The chief, Murdoch, the captain, and myself. I hauled them out, still in all their pristine newness and grease.
The fact of the matter is there are far more passengers than crew. British and American society at this time is hierarchical and it's rules-based. People will do what they are told, but not when their lives are at stake. This is what the officers fear.
Third-class passengers naturally gravitated towards the aftwell deck, which is the outdoor space that they've had use of. But it is still 3 decks below the boat deck where the lifeboats are.
There was a lot of confusion, with people running around, crying, swearing, and praying. Since I couldn't speak English, I hardly knew what was happening. I had to push people apart to find a place to walk.
There's a sea of passengers already gathered there. So Eugene and Anna are joining this throng of people.
I went up on deck. People were running around.
The Titanic, being an immigrant ship, must conform to American and British immigration laws. And one of those laws is around quarantine, maintaining steerage class passengers in areas separate from the first and second class passengers to stop the spread of disease. Before the third-class passengers have even boarded Titanic, they've had to be subjected to medical examinations. They're hemmed in by lock.
But the officer dragged him to his feet and ordered him back onto the ship. We begged for his life.
Please give him a chance.
The officer drew his revolver and thrust it into his face. I gave you 10 seconds to get back onto that ship before I blow your brains out.
Please don't. My mother said I called out. Don't shoot!
The officer suddenly changed his tone. He lowered his revolver and looked the boy squarely in the eyes. For God's sake, be a man. We have got women and children.
We have women and children.
The little lad turned round and climbed back without a word. He was not saved.
Lower the boats!
To avoid another occurrence of that sort, I fired my revolver as I was going down each deck, because the boat wouldn't stand a sudden jerk. She was loaded already with people and would not stand anymore.
There are 10 lifeboats left on deck now, and 1,960 people still to save. Titanic now was so low in the water that iconic areas like the grand staircase and some of the luxury staterooms were flooding. There's no doubt at all that this was unstoppable. It was merely a question of time.
Phillips told me the wireless was growing weaker.
Carpathia! Titanic! Calling Carpathia! Are you guys coming? Yes, we are. Alright, please hurry. Don't have much time. We'll be sinking fast here.
Jack Phillips has spent the last few hours trying to communicate with other wireless operators. Carpathia is sailing at full speed towards Titanic, but she's still 2 hours away. On the nearest ship, the Californian, nobody recognised or responded to the distress flares, but Phillips still believes that as long as he can get signals out, he may be of some use. But now the electricity is starting to fail. Then he does get a message from his sister ship, Olympic. But she seems not to understand at all what is happening to Titanic and thinks Titanic must be limping along, sailing towards them. Right now, it's clear on board ship that no rescue vessel is going to reach Titanic before she sinks.
T-Mobile has the best network. That's why.
Alright, Titanic calling Carpathia. Please hurry. Don't have much time. We are sinking fast. Alright, we're making our way as quickly as we can. We're coming. Hopefully you can hold on much longer. Well, actually, we don't have much time to hold much longer. We cannot last this long.
Most risk at this moment. There's the language difficulties. There's probably a bit of aggression, I think, that's setting in, annoyance, frustration.
At this moment, we would expect the adrenaline to kick in. The body wants to survive, and it gives us some sort of innate choices. You might fight your way to the front physically. People might freeze where they're just stuck. They're in terror. They don't know what to do. We also see people who are turning inward, and that would be turning to God as well, making the sign.
Trying to get into them. There is such panic in that crowd.
the crying of children and the screaming of a woman. You know, these are terrifying sounds that we are programmed to have a sort of visceral reaction to. I remember from living through my trauma, my wounding in Afghanistan, sounds stay with you far more than sights. That is a powerful thing for the senses to take on board and for ultimately you to then have to live with.
I tried to get into a lifeboat and I was pushed back. It seemed as though I would go down with the ship. Ideas about self-control and stoicism and self-sacrifice are celebrated as forms of gentlemanliness as well as manliness. These are the values that they've been told to hold to. And it means putting yourself second. That is the ideal as far as Edwardian society. The achievement of his career, the creation of this amazing, opulent ship. And now he can see that it is all going to the bottom of the sea.
Did you think it was in a very serious condition?
As time got on, I did.
And that the ship was sinking?
I did. I helped for nearly 2 hours, as far as I can judge, at the starboard boats, helping women and children into the boats and lowering them over the side.
I think the sense of responsibility for Bruce Ismay must have been huge. We see this in the fact that he spends time patrolling the boat deck, putting people into boats, instructing crew how to behave. But he knows that there aren't enough lifeboats on board. He knows by this point that there's no rescue ship coming anytime soon. These lives are on his conscience.
The ship was listing heavily in the bow. Somebody gave me a push towards the boat. And I got in. That girl and I went together. The lifeboat was so crowded.
When I got to the deck, a lifeboat was hanging from the davits. Number 13 boat. It was pretty well filled when I got there. The boatswain who knew me, as I'd sailed with him on other ships before, said to me, "You get on this boat and pull an oar."
Get in the boat. I need oars.
Fred is in the lifeboat because, you know, he's one of those strong enough to be able to row it. And at this stage, the crew is now starting to really fill the lifeboats.
So I took his orders, and I got on as he swung from the davits. We had women, men, and 2 little babies. One 2 months old, and the other 10 months old.
It's suspended by davits off the side of the ship at this point. It's about 80 meters above the water, but every person that gets in adds that weight, adds that movement, adds that risk. And so there has to be a point at which you say that's enough.
About 3 more people get in after I did. And then the orders were given, let no more on that boat.
or the falls will break.
That means looking into the whites of people's eyes and saying, there's no more space.
The boat was being filled with women. Maggie and Bertha got in, and I got in. The officer called me to go back, but I got in. They told me to get out, but I didn't stir. Then they got a hold of me and pulled me out.
Eugene's testimony makes me like him. I think he's honest, he's frank. He's not trying to put a spin on his own behavior or anyone else's. I get the feeling of a real historical account in its warts and all attitude.
What's sad about this story is that most of those officers knew the people that they were turning away, in the sense that they were from the same class, the same kind.
Well, if I didn't save myself, at least I saved the two girls.
Captain Smith had severe doubts about whether a fully laden lifeboat could be lowered properly. He knew there were a lot of people waiting down at the gangway doors to get into boats, and therefore he thought, how can I manage to get these boats full? How can I save as many of the people whose lives I am responsible for as is possible?
The captain came and said, Mr. Boxall, you go away in that boat, pointing to boat number 2. I tumbled into this lifeboat and started to lower her. And the captain looked over and told me, go round to the starboard side.
To the gangway doors!
Which was practically on the opposite side to where I was lowered.
So Boxall's lifeboat is only about 45% full, was meant to go round to the starboard side of the ship to take on more passengers.
I was using the stroke oar, standing up, and there was this lady helping. She was steering around the ship's stern. When I passed around the boat to get to the gangway door on the starboard side, her propellers were out of water. But when I did eventually reach there, I found that there was such a mob standing at the gangway doors. If they jumped, they'd swamp the boat. I daren't go alongside. She was only a small boat.
And it's a really tricky one because, yes, crew should follow orders, and the structure of discipline is how you can try and create some form of order in moments of chaos. There is a good reason why, in circumstances we are not to question orders. Having said that, it's all well and good one of your superiors giving you an order, but they're not seeing the circumstances that you are witnessing.
I pulled off and laid off until I pulled away about a quarter of a mile, I suppose.
The forward well deck was underwater. I saw Philip still sending away.
I suspect many people on the ship by now are in an altered state, which we know is what happens when people are facing death. Jack Phillips won't leave his post. It is a clear single.
And said, "Men, you have done your full duty. You can do no more.
Now it's every man for himself.
I release you."
Every man for himself now. In the conflicts I trained for, it's unimaginable that we would ever find ourselves in a circumstance where it was every man for themselves. The last of the hard-hulled lifeboats have been dispatched, but there is still 2 collapsible lifeboats left on the boat deck.
There was some disturbance loading the last 2 forward boats. A large crowd of men were pressing to get into them, though there were many crew and men lined up with apparently not a thought at attempting to board the boats without orders. I saw Bruce Ismay, who had been assisting in loading the last boat, push his way into it. Really was every man for himself.
Bruce Ismay decides to save himself. He is about the only man on board who can't be ordered out of that spot by any of the remaining crew.
You were one of those, as the managing director, responsible for determining the number of lifeboats.
Yes, in conjunction with the shipbuilders.
When you got into the boat, you thought that the Titanic was sinking.
I did.
Did you know that there were some hundreds of people on that ship?
Yes.
Who must go down with her?
Yes, I did.
Prepare to load the lifeboat.
Has it occurred to you that you, as the responsible managing director, deciding the number of boats, owed your life to every other person on that ship?
It has not. I have searched my mind with the deepest care. I'm sure I did nothing that I shouldn't have done. My conscience is clear. I took a chance of escape when it came to me. I did not seek it. It is true I'm president of the company, but I didn't consider myself any different from the rest of the passengers. I took no other man's place.
I took no man's place. This is palpably untrue.
Please, Ida, get to the boat. No, we've been living together for many years. Where you go, I go. Please don't argue.
There was a terrible crowd standing about.
As the Titanic sinks deeper and deeper into the water, some passengers claim that an officer shot 1 or 2 men before himself. However, this claim remains a mystery to this day. Once again, as the Titanic sinks deeper and deeper, some passengers claim to see an officer shot 2 men before himself. But once again, this answer remains unknown to this day.
The officer in charge pointed a revolver, waved his hand, and said that if any man tried to get in, he'd shoot him on the spot.
If anyone tries to enter, I will shoot.
2 men tried to break through, and he shot them both. I tried to get to the boat myself, but was afraid I would be shot, and stayed back.
When we rowed away from the Titanic, my face was towards the sinking steamer. The things I saw, I'll never forget.
Death stares everyone in the face. Some will escape, some won't. Jack Phillips, he's young, but he's responsible, he's self-reliant.
It's after the captain had released him. I suddenly felt for him a great reverence to see him standing there sticking to his work while everybody else was raging about. I will never forget the work of Phillips for those last awful minutes.
I was working in the engine room. We got the order, all hands on deck, put your life preservers on. The deck was full of male third-class passengers. The last boat was getting lowered.
About this time, I met all the engineers as they came trooping up from below. Up to that time, they had loyally stuck to their guns.
When the crew come up on deck, These guys who've worked so heroically to try to keep Titanic afloat, they expect that there will be a place for them in the lifeboats. And of course, that is not the case.
It was a bleak and hopeless spectacle that met their eyes. Empty falls hanging from every davit head. And not a hope for any of them.
Captain Smith and Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, must have been in hell. This was their unsinkable ship.
Andrews was seen throwing steamer chairs into the water with the idea of actually helping those who got into the sea to have something to support them. During the Falklands War, I was captain of a ship that was bombed, which I had to abandon. And so I know the pressures he was under. And I personally think that he probably stayed on the bridge and waited to meet his fate.
There's something of the stiff upper lip happening here, but inside there must be inner turmoil, because survival instinct is really powerful, and the captain is probably suppressing it as much as he can.
It's about this time Near My God to Thee is playing.
Back in the wireless room, Jack Phillips has stuck to his post right to the end, even when Captain Smith has said it's every man for himself, because he believes he's doing something useful. The sea has almost reached the wireless room, and they have just minutes before it's filled with freezing water.
I was back in my room, getting Phillips's money for him. And as I looked out the door, I saw a stoker, or somebody from below decks, slipping the lifebelt off his back. You know, I remembered in a flash the way Phillips had clung on, how I'd had to fix that lifebelt in place because he was too busy to do it. I felt a passion not to let that man die a decent sailor's death. I hope I finished him, I don't know. We left him on the floor of the wireless cabin. He wasn't moving. I climbed on top of the officers' quarters. But I saw the last of Phillips.
He doesn't say goodbye, he doesn't give any explanation, there's no clap on the back to his junior. He's done everything, there's nothing more to do. The man is ready to die.
At this stage, all of the lifeboats on the boat deck have been launched, and of course there's a panic that there are no lifeboats left. But there is actually two more stashed away on the roof of the officers' quarters, collapsible A and B.
I saw the boat and the men trying to push it off. They couldn't do it. I went up to them, lending a hand.
Now the crew are trying to launch them in increasingly difficult and desperate conditions.
Just then, the ship took a slight but definite plunge. The sea came rolling up in a wave.
When a large wave washes collapsible A and B overboard, you've just been given that hope, but in amongst the chaos, the lifeboats are stolen from you by the elements, and that is just devastating.
The big wave carried the boat off. I had hold of an oarlock and
went off with it. Water was washing right across the deck, and we were in water right to our hips. Another lurch threw myself off and away from the ship into the water. I was underwater and knew I had to fight for it.
The temperature in the water is -2 degrees. So as soon as that cold water hits the body, there's a shock reaction and the mind is reacting in a state of panic.
Everything I touched seemed to be woman's hair. Children crying. Woman screaming. Their hair in my face. If only I could forget those hands and faces that I touched.
The ship was sinking on its head very quickly. The water was right up to the bridge. The crowd moved with it, pushing towards the stern.
A sight that doesn't bear dwelling on. To stand there above the wheelhouse, watching the frantic struggles to climb up the sloping deck, unable to even hold out a helping hand. I knew the futility of following that instinct for self-preservation. It would only be postponing the plunge and prolonging the agony. Turning to the bridge, I took a header. Striking the water was like 1,000 knives being driven into one's body. For a few moments, I completely lost grip of myself.
We were at the starboard rail to keep away from the crowd. The ship began to shoot down fast, the water rushing up towards us. We had no time to think, only to act.
The people who choose to jump are ultimately the people who take some form of control in a situation where you are powerless.
We were about 5 minutes away from the ship. But we could still see it as the light stayed on. The ship stood almost on its nose, slowly sinking. The people on the Titanic were yelling and crying. I could see some of them as they jumped into the water.
The end was very close. Something in the bowels of the Titanic exploded and sparks shot up to the sky. 2 other explosions followed, dull and heavy, as if below the surface.
The huge weight of seawater in the bows and in the stern meant that the two things were unable to remain as one part.
The whole superstructure of the ship seemed to split.
The lights suddenly go out, and then darkness falls.
The Titanic broke in two before my eyes. The forepart wallowed over and disappeared instantly. The ship seemed to right herself, like a hurt animal with a broken back.
For a strange
The Titanic broke in two before my eyes. The forepart wallowed over and disappeared instantly. The ship seemed to right herself, like a hurt animal with a broken back.
For a strange hallucinatory moment, it looks as though everything's going to be fine because the weird, wonky, distorted angles of the great ship start to settle.
There's people that think that some sort of safety feature has kicked in. You know, at least this half of the ship is going to somehow survive and those on board are going to be spared. But ultimately that is short-lived.
I saw the Titanic go up in the air. Ever so big.
huge ship reared herself on end, rather than propel her clear of the water, till at last she assumed a perpendicular position.
We saw groups of the 1,500 people still aboard, clinging like swarming bees.
The contents of the Titanic is now falling through it, and tragically, people as well.
I think it was only at that moment that many of those poor souls on board realised their fate.
If we're gonna die, I said, it would be best to die gripping something. We gripped the rail.
A sharp exclamation from my husband. My God, she is going now.
The steamer, without a sound, except for the shrieks of the people still on board, stood right on end. It stood there several moments, and
slid straight down into the water.
As easily as a pebble in a pond.
Our proud ship. Our beautiful Titanic.
At 2:20 a.m., April 15, 1912, RMS Titanic sinks beneath the waters of the North Atlantic Ocean.
Everyone round me on the upturned boat breathed the two words, "She's gone."
I did not wish to see her go down. I'm glad that I did not. My back was turned to her. We were pulling away.
This is his ship. This is his company. And there is intense professional and personal shame here. I think that was just too overwhelming for him to be able to look.
Probably a minute passed, with almost dead silence and quiet.
Then an unforgettable cry went up from 1,500 despairing throats.
Alright guys, and that is it for this video today. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Make sure to hit the like, subscribe button. See my future video. See you guys next time. Bye bye.